Hello and welcome. Tonight we are going to be looking at some stories from a website that I found pretty recently. It's called Liminal Earth, and it's a website where people submit their strange experiences, whether it's a ghost sighting, a UFO sighting, a cryptid sighting, things of that nature. And along with their stories, they give a location. And that location is then put on Google Maps. So it's pretty interesting because with each story, you can look at the exact location where it allegedly happened. I did a video where we looked at this website previous to this one, and we looked at stories under the category Thin Places. And tonight, I just can't help myself. I love to categorize stories. I just have to have a theme. It's so satisfying to me. So tonight we are going to be looking at stories that all have the theme on the road or roadside sightings. So these will all be experiences people had while driving or while near a road. And we're just going to go through some stories I found on there and casually read them. I won't really go too in-depth into any folklore probably or any discussion tonight as I do in the other videos I do called Ghosts with Goblin, where we read first-hand paranormal experiences, but we go very in-depth with folklore, science, urban legend. This is more casual. You know, something I wish they had about Google Maps is I wish they had a night mode. So for the last video, as I was reading the stories, I was clicking through the street view on Google Maps on the location where the story took place. But, you know, all the images taken for Google Maps are in daylight, and that's just not as spooky. So I'm going to include some footage of dark, lonely roads for you as we're reading the stories. And then after the stories, I will definitely show you the actual location. But, you know, I just want that nighttime vibe. So just relax, pretend you're in a car on a dark road. And don't worry, you're not driving. Just relax, I got you. All right, I'm behind the wheel. You just relax. You turn the temperature how you want it to be. You know, get a little blanket, put your seat back a little bit if you want. And let's just go for a ride, a night ride, and hear some spooky stories. So if that sounds good to you, I'm going to get started. The first story that we're going to read is called Creatures with Human Faces, and it takes place in Yucca Valley, California. It occurred approximately sometime in the early 1990s. My aunt and uncle saw two giant hairy creatures with human faces walking on all fours in perfect sync with each other as they crossed the road right in front of them. And they were also accompanied with a pack of stray dogs following them. They said they felt the ground shake with every step they took as they stopped and stared at them, and then turned away and kept marching on. That's a pretty short story, but I think it's a good one. Can you imagine that entering your headlights as you're driving down the road? And this area is very close to a lot of national parks, like Joshua Tree. So there's a lot of wilderness in this area. And if you look at this road, let's look at the real road now, and just imagine it being nighttime. I imagine it gets darker than dark. I'm not seeing any streetlights, so I bet it'd be pretty spooky. So I tried digging around a little bit for maybe some kind of cryptid that would match this description. I didn't really come up with anything. Maybe someone has heard of something or seen something like this before. But there is a local Bigfoot to this area. It's called the Yucca Man. It's also known as the Mojave Bigfoot, also called the Sierra Highway Devil. So the Yucca Man, I guess, is seen on roads, on highways. The Yucca Man does appear to be bipedal, not on four legs, but described as a large, giant, hairy man. So, who knows? Okay, next one. It's kind of a short one too, but it's called Beautiful and Terrifying Cryptoid. And this one takes place in Vail, Colorado, around September 2010. My friend and I were driving to Carbondale, Colorado from Denver late at night. We both spotted a huge wolf-like creature in the middle of the highway. Luckily, it was around 3 a.m., so we were the only car on the road, and I was able to stop the car in time. We froze with goosebumps and made eye contact with the creature for what felt like a long time before it jumped the median along the highway and disappeared into the dark woods. The beautiful and terrifying cryptoid was taller than our car, around 4 to 5 feet tall on all four legs, with piercing eyes. There are no wolves in Colorado, and this was certainly larger than a wolf. We had never seen anything like it, and we both still think of the experience often. Sounds pretty much like a giant wolf, which would be beautiful and terrifying. And 3 a.m. And I'm not very familiar with Colorado wildlife, so I had to look up if there are indeed no wolves in Colorado. And apparently they don't exist in the wild anymore in Colorado. And again, if we look at this road, just imagine it being nighttime. Next, we are going to White Plains, New York, to Buckout Road. Now, they put the date from the 1600s to current. I'll explain that a little bit after the story. There are so many stories about this place, from people like my friend's dad, who grew up near there and would go there in the 80s. Much creepier back then. There are stories of witches, the white ghost deer, a small cemetery, and much more. One of the well-known stories is of the flesh-eating albinos. Apparently, there was a house that they lived in. It burnt down, though. Anyway, the road has weird vibes and is heavily forested. Me and my best friend would drive up and down it, screaming for fun. This time I went on the road was with my best friend and her dad with all the creepy stories. That time we saw a weird light or lantern in the woods. He said back in the day there used to be a lot of abandoned mansions there. He and all his friends would explore. They featured stairs that go to nowhere, and pools with mosaics of the Joker playing card. Just weird vibes. They were all knocked down though. It's a short drive, but there are myths abound here. Yeah, this one does look like it would be a great road to drive down if you want to be creeped out. Everybody's got one of these roads, right? This is classic stuff. So as they said, there's a lot of legends surrounding Buckout Road. I did a little research into that, and that is true. There are a handful of legends just surrounding this short little wooded road in New York. Apparently the road was named after a family called the Buckouts or the Buckouts. I don't know, there's an H added to the family name. And with all these, I didn't go too deep into debunking rumors from facts. So we'll just kind of generalize and assume most of it is rumor. That's how urban legends go, right? Anyway, surrounding this family, the Buckouts, there are many stories of murder and different ways that people in the family died. As far as the date range, starting in the 1600s, there's also rumors of witches and witches being burned at the stake. Those were definitely rumors. apparently, one of the legends is that there were 3 X's on the road, and this marked where 3 alleged witches were burned at the stake. Now, of course, the road is haunted by the witches, cursed, and there's a couple other ghosts. I mean, there's ghosts alleged to be from the Buckout family and all their strange and gruesome and untimely deaths. There's the ghosts of the witches. There is also the ghost of a man. It was called the Leather Man, who was just a vagrant hermit who dwelled in caves around the area and would just be known to walk around. He wasn't any sort of menacing figure, it seems. Just your local hermit cave dweller, such as myself. There's also the White Lady. That's another ghost, which is identified as a couple different people. The most popular, infamous legend, we'll say, from Buckout Road is the flesh-eating albinos, as they mentioned. Not only is this one not true, it's also, of course, not very, what's the word? Politically correct, you know what I'm saying? But many urban legends aren't. So with that in mind, the legend is that there was a house called the Red House on Buckout Road, where if you drove by, pulled up, parked outside, at night, of course, and honked 3 times, a family colony, something of people with albinism would run outside and kill you and eat you. I don't think I have to say that this is not true. Obviously, this is not true, but it's just one of those backwoods urban legends. Not even backwoods. They happen in the cities too. And the Red House is no longer there. It was torn down, but it's still, the legend lives on. It still brings people there on Halloween or at night for a spooky good time. They also mention the ghost deer, the white ghost deer. And from what I found, this legend came to be, that was the one I was honestly most interested in. Apparently that legend was from the Native American tribe who originally inhabited the area. And they believed that during full moons, a beautiful great white deer could be seen, would visit the area, and to lay eyes on it would bring good fortune. They also called it the ghost deer. That Native American tribe was the Siwanoi. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. The small cemetery that the author mentioned, I believe, is called Stony Hill Cemetery. It's alleged to be, like all cemeteries, it's alleged to be haunted. Some of the ghosts are the Bread Man, Albino Mary. I don't know what the fascination with albinism is in these parts. And people generally report hearing odd noises and just weird vibes at the cemetery. So yeah, there's a wealth of legend surrounding Buckout Road. They were not kidding. Whether how much of it is true or not, I still find it interesting. It's always fun to have a little haunted road, as long as no one's being pestered or anything. So, that is Buckout Road. Alright, then this next one is short, and I'm just throwing it in for a giggle, because it's pretty silly, but it does fit our theme. It takes place in somewhere in Massachusetts, somewhere I can't pronounce. Tingsboro, I believe. And it's called What Was I Scared Of? Takes place in fall 2004. Saw a ghostly pair of jeans striding across the road. This area of the road gets quite foggy at night, but the unmistakable form of a pair of pants ran through the fog without disturbing it at all. That's the end of the story. I just thought ghost jeans were fun. Were pretty fun. It actually is kind of a creepy road though, and foggy. I bet it would look pretty cool, but ghost jeans, man, running through the fog. Pretty scary stuff. The next story takes place in Stillwater, Oklahoma. It took place around July 1997, and it's called Phantom Truck at Tumbleweed Dance Hall. I grew up, among other places, in Stillwater, Oklahoma. As a teenager, I was out one night just rambling eastbound on West Lakeview Road, a disaffected youth with their disaffected friends, looking for mischief that we were sure to find near the Tumbleweed Dance Hall. The Weed is an iconic country western bar full of shit kickers and rednecks that might give a teenager a long neck after closing time. It's really hard for me not to read this story in a southern accent. While the area is more developed today, it was solidly the country then, even if it was technically just outside of the city limits of that big cow town. I don't know this country vernacular. Giant, jacked-up pickup trucks with pipes and stacks that bellowed black smoke were common sights and sounds as they dangerously sped up and down those roads. However, when one of those wasn't passing, it was quiet enough that you would hear even a more modest vehicle coming from miles away. My friends and I had just made it over the top of the hill when the blinding headlights and roaring engine of one of these trucks snuck up behind us. We all jumped off the road into the ditches, so surprised by the impossible appearance of such a thundering vehicle. The truck never passed, though. The headlights and engine sounds just cut out. It was dead quiet, except for the hollering in the distance by the Weed. We all ran back to the top of the hill as fast as our legs would take us and looked west down the road. There was absolutely nothing there. We were all thinking it, but nobody wanted to say it. Were we just visited by a phantom truck? At once, we started an ad hoc investigation. County Road 3290 was too far west for the vehicle to have coasted back down the hill with its lights cut in neutral, and the only other turnoffs were into private residences that we knew the owners of and were either gated or we trespassed on immediately in order to see if it could have possibly turned off. Our only conclusion was that we had seen a bona fide phantom lifted truck, probably on their way to the Weed for a cold beer, calf fry, and some good old-fashioned two-stepping. That's a fun story, isn't it? There's something, there's something that I love about a classic ghost car story. It's something that's so easy to, kind of explain away, but I don't know, there's just still something so creepy about being on back roads, and it's just a fun classic tale. And this one kind of reminded me of Jeepers Creepers. I don't know if you guys were thinking that, but the big loud truck barreling down the country road, and then maybe it turned off into some spooky murder manor that they don't even know about. So I had to check, because the unofficial main character of this story was Tumbleweed Dance Hall, right? And I had to check and see if it was still there, and it is indeed still there, guys. It's still open, it's still operating. We have Tumbleweed events, private events even, the calf fry. I've never heard of this before, a calf fry. Anyway, I think that was just a very well-told story, and would love to hear more stories from the SP. Okay, next we have a little short one. It's another little short cryptid sighting. It's called Evil Creature. Takes place in Edgewater, Florida, and it is from sometime around 2005. My mom and I were driving home about 10 p.m. at night on a dark stretch of road. Suddenly, moving across the street, was a dark creature on 4 legs, walking like a crab walks, sideways. It had a face almost like a monkey, but evil. I was driving, so I waited a second to process what I had just seen, and we both yelled at the same time. Did you just see that? We still talk about this regularly, and cannot figure out what we saw that night. we all know there's something creepy about Florida, right? This just looks like a regular residential area. I love the Spanish moss hanging from the trees. It's so beautiful. But this just looks like a neighboring residence street, which honestly kind of makes it creepy in its own way. You expect to see that in the middle of nowhere, but just in the suburbs, that's kind of creepy. Crab walking evil monkey. Alright, I've got one more for you tonight, and it's a nice long one. It takes place in Worcester, I think that's how you say that, Massachusetts, fall 2004, and it's called Road Phantoms. When I was in my teens and early 20s, I was prone to hallucinations. I suffered from depressive episodes and manic episodes and took a lot of medication to deal with it. Sometimes I joke that most people take drugs to trip, and all I had to do was not take them. These problems were made worse by my persistent regimen of marijuana. None of this describes who I am today, and looking back, it seems like someone else's life entirely. I say all this in the interest of full disclosure, ahead of the weird ghost tale I'm adding to the map. I used to see what I called road phantoms. Because of my condition at the time, I assumed they were purely hallucinatory and, as such, didn't feel the need to talk about them. Sometimes I'd see one in the middle of the road and freak out a bit as a passenger, and whoever was driving would ask what was wrong, at which point the phantom would be gone, and I'd have to shrug and say it was nothing. Usually, the road phantoms were fairly distinct figures, standing in or alongside the road, and on some occasions would only be partial people. Two that spring to mind immediately that were almost assuredly hallucinations were a headless family of 3 and a hovering torso that turned out to be a mailbox. The night in question, I was closing up the cafe where I worked, and my fellow barista, who was on with me that night, proposed we go across town for a drink at the bar. We took the long way there to allow time for pot smoking, and on the home stretch of Franklin Street, I saw her. A tall, pale woman with curly hair and a polka dot dress, standing just enough in the road to be alarming. She appeared to be soaked from head to toe, and she gazed at us from a tilted forward neck position as we approached. I was holding a hit, and had just passed the joints when my friend swerved around her. It took me a second to realize, wait, he saw it too? Damn, he said. Did you see that chick? She's gonna get hit standing there. I informed him that she wasn't there. At least, she wouldn't be if we went back. Just another road phantom. He stopped the car and did a 3-point turn. Less than a minute had elapsed when we drove back there to find no trace of the woman in the polka dot dress. Franklin Street overlooks part of the city, down an embankment that's pretty steep. Aside from a few mechanics on that road, there's no place to go but down, or into thin air. The woman was soaked, although it wasn't raining. We were high, and I was prone to seeing things, but could we have seen the same thing if it was hallucinatory? In more recent years, I've brought the story up to the friend in question. He doesn't remember it happening. I find a lot of folks conveniently forget things that they can't rationalize. I've also met other people who have seen the road phantoms. Who knows what's going on with that? Straight up ghosts or drug-induced visions? At least on that one night, I had a little bit of vindication that these things weren't just in my head. I thought that was a very well-told story, a very interesting story. Wasn't a straight-up, cut-and-dry ghost story. It's kind of up for debate, but still unsettling, whether it was true or not. It kind of reminded me of when they were describing the ones they had seen that were like headless. What did they say? A headless family of 3 and a hovering torso. That kind of reminded me of The Sixth Sense. That scene in The Sixth Sense where they're like driving and the kid sees like a ghost of someone who had like been in a car accident and like their head was like all bloody. It kind of reminded me of that, which was very chilling. So seeing it with your own eyes, I'm sure, is even more so. All right, those are all the stories I have for you tonight. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you enjoyed your cozy car ride, laying down in the back seat or passenger seat with the seat reclined. Got your hot vent on, your blanket. Doesn't that sound nice? As we drove through the dark and saw some strange things. This is a topic that I love. For some reason, I'm sure it's a theme we're going to come back to at some point. There's so many urban legends associated with roads, and like I said earlier, there's just something about a dark, winding road that just inspires the imagination and stirs up spooky imagery, and it's something that I enjoy, and I hope you did too. Thank you once again so much for joining me. I hope you have a marvelously spooky and magic rest of your night. Until next time.